Have you ever considered that Jesus wasn't the only thing nailed to the cross that day? Have you ever considered, as you read the New Testament, that perhaps Jesus wasn't the only thing nailed to the cross that day? Something else was nailed there as well. Listen closely to what else was nailed on that cross according to Colossians chapter 2, verse 14. It says, God canceled the record of the charges against us and took it away, now watch this, by nailing it to the cross. He took our debt away by nailing it to the cross. And so we're left with this mental image that right before the nail pierces his hand, there's this document that just slips in. And as it's drove into Jesus' hand, the document is now attached to the cross as well. And what's on this document? It's a list of every single area you have fallen short. It's a list of every sin in your life. It's a list of everything that you have done wrong in your life. And listen, I was just imagining my list this morning. And my list, it's just long. It's not going on a Post-it, you understand? It's going on a scroll. And it just is long. And imagine, and the image that we're left with is that everything was written on this list. Every little sin, listen, every big sin that you had, every little sin that you had, every sin that you don't want anybody else to know about, every sin that you've been struggling with from now, and every sin that you struggled with in high school, every sin that you tried to seek counseling about. Listen, every sin that you have ever committed is on this list, and the image that we see is that the blood is now covering that list. And you can't see those offenses anymore. Beloved, the only thing that you can see is the blood of Jesus Christ. You cannot see it anymore. The only thing that you can see is the blood. And listen, the great phrase is, the debt has been paid. Because it's one thing to live in poverty, it's one thing to be poor, but it is another thing to have a debt hanging over your head. And what has just kept coming back to me over and over and over again this week is that if Jesus had a document, if he had his own document of all the wrongdoings that he had, it would have been blank. Yet my list, it grows by the day. It grew this week as I was even preparing for this message. So my list is growing, but his list was blank. And so on Good Friday, we realized that it should have been us, the ones up on that cross. It should have been you, it should have been me, and we should have been punished for our own wrongdoings and for our own sins. It should have been us that was up on the cross for our own rebellious hearts. It should have been us for our own shortcomings, for the harmful things that we've said, the harmful things that we have said, or the harmful things that we have thought. For the destructive things that we have done, and maybe the destructive things that we are doing right now. And so Good Friday is this reminder that we are left needing a king who can be and do what we cannot, a king that would sacrifice for his people. And that is the image, a king that would pay the debt for you. And so one who knew no sin became sin that you might be redeemed. That, my friend, is the gospel. That, my friend, is the good news. That is why Good Friday is so amazing. The Bible actually tells us that in Galatians, that when he hung on the cross, he actually became cursed because he carried all of the sins of all time upon him. And that's why on this Good Friday story, the Father turns his back on his one and only Son because he became cursed for all the sins of all time. And the reason that Jesus was cursed and the Father turned his back on the Son in that moment, beloved, is so that the Father would never turn his back on you. There's not one time that the Father will ever turn his back on you, and that is what makes Good Friday so amazing. And so while other religions say do, the gospel says it has already been done. And so Good Friday is good because God doesn't just connect to you on the basis of what you have done or what you haven't done, but on the basis of what Jesus Christ has done for you. What he did on the cross was he paid the debt.